Starting recording, and let me switch off my video and go to screen and go live. Can you guys see my screen? Let me know if you can see my screen.
Yes, it is clear.
All right, so I made a bit of progress, and I wanted to enable these three things tonight, maybe two of the three. So I want to attach the mute unmute button to do something again, which I had broken once I brought the menus into VR. And I wanted to add a menu for primitive creation, like create a box, create a triangle, that kind of stuff. And then this one isn't hooked up yet, so if you see a bounding box and you grab it and you move it around, it doesn't persist. So I think there's an event we're not listening to. So let's take a look at this one first. So I have my server running down here below, and if we go to a local host, you'll see that I've pulled this menu here. Now previously this was a svelte overlay, which means that it was compiled to HTML elements, and if you clicked on it and then you pressed your cursor keys like forward, backward, left, or right, the canvas wasn't highlighted, so you weren't interacting with the scene. Now I could set the focus to the canvas when you did that, but the other problem is I kind of had to develop these twice. So once in HTML and then once for VR using the texture. Now there's still a feeling of developing it twice a little bit, but not so much, because this menu here, as it opens up this is a texture, is the same menu that would be open up in VR. So if I go here, now I've disabled it so when you switch between immersive VR and you go out, I've made it so that it closes the menu, because if not, when you're in VR and you have the menu open, and if you pop back here, if you had the editing mode on where something is selected, it kind of is it prevented you from clicking on the GUI menu. So if I exit this now, now everything's closed. So actually the same thing happens. So I don't know what the problem is. So yeah, there's a bug here somewhere where I come out of immersive mode, I don't seem to be able to interact with this anymore. So maybe that wasn't the solution there. Open this. I can close this. And so what this does is it sends a signal. So if I go to console, let me clear this, and so here's a way to send a message. You can use Signal Hub, which I added to the window object. You say menu action, open menu. So if I send this, it will open that menu. And so that's a way you can test this, because you can't really control this in VR simulator. So if I go over here, the menu is closed, but if I send this message again, there's our menu there, and I can send close menu, and it will close the menu, and I can jump back out of immersive mode. But something's strange. It's like I'm not interacting with this one. But maybe we can take a look at that quickly. So we have Orchestrator as the main JavaScript point. Orchestrator creates Scene Manager, and Scene Manager creates a Menu Manager, passing along the Orchestrator in here. And Menu Manager holds some state, so it's like the menu is open, false, muted is true, and you're not in an editing mode, so editing is false, and you're browsing the main menu, which if the menu is closed, so open is false, then we're not even rendering this section. So that rendering section happens when you click on this and this section opens. The content of this thing is what I call the browsing name. And then we have some listeners here set up. So when the camera is ready, this is the 2D camera. When it's ready, we receive a message, and then we're drawing the flat full screen UI. So this version here, the thing that renders this is the full screen UI. And then we're listening for when the controller is ready. So when you enter VR, we're listening for some other things, and then we're sending a message when your controller is ready. So when your left controller is ready, we'll create the VR overlay, and that's this menu over here. So this, if you probably can't see it well, but let me lift this up a bit. This is our left menu, and this overlay here is created over your left hand when we call this function here, create the VR menu overlay. Then we're listening to when you're entering XR or exiting. So if you're exiting XR, this is what I added, which maybe we don't need this. This was kind of just closing all the menus and saying editing is false. So that apparently wasn't the issue. So let me close this. So exiting XR means you go back to the 2D mode. We just call create full screen again, and then we'll dispose of the wrist. So this should give us back the original menu that we're looking at. And vice versa, when you're entering XR, we'll destroy the full screen GUI, and this VR menu will be created when the controller is ready. Finally, we have some listeners for the menu action itself. When you're closing the menu and opening the menu, this will change the state that we created in the first place. It will set those flags. If you say go to about, it will change the browsing about. And then the change of the state is rendered by this render function. So based on those flags, it will figure out what to draw next. So I'll just save this. And so what we have is a menu that opens, and you can click on about, which changes. It's sending messages through that signal hub. So it says browse is about now. This is the about, which just says hello about me, and you can click this back, which goes back to main, which is this thing. You can toggle this edit mode, which allows you to click on these things and move them about. And then we can try this in VR. And then you can click off of it, which makes those widgets disappear. Finally, you can close the menu here. And so similarly, this should work in VR. So in VR, we're over here. It draws that menu. We can send a message to open this menu, and then we can jump to like go to about. Notice how this changed. Now we're in the about, and we can go back to main. Sorry, go to main. And we can close the menu. And finally, we can exit the immersive mode. So what I can't figure out is why this is not interactable anymore. So let me maybe pull up the scene debugger. Okay, so we have the GUI here, and we have two advanced dynamics textures. Oh, maybe I should get rid of these textures too. So we have this full screen GUI. And okay, so what happens if I just get rid of these? Let's see, can we dispose of this? Where's the dispose button? That's not what I want. Maybe if I just, let's see, advanced dynamic texture. Okay, going back to the code. So when we exited VR, exiting VR, we created this and we only disposed of the wrist plane. We didn't dispose of the other plane. And then the textures didn't get disposed. So I think we need this, the browse plane and texture or material. First of all, okay, so this will dispose of the mesh, but the texture wasn't disposed of. And we created the mesh from the texture. The texture ought to have a name as well. Let's see. Okay, we do have this. So these are the mesh. And okay, we do have the textures. Wrist GUI and browse GUI. Yeah, let's get rid of those as well. And I'm not sure if we need to do this, but maybe if we set them all to null, because I think there's still some object even if you're disposing them. Let's just set all of these to null. Okay, so let's try this now. So this works here, and then I jump into VR. Okay, let's just exit VR. Oh, this is gone. Let's open up this thing. GUI. I have full screen GUI. Root. Adapted menu. Menu div. Okay, I think I'm missing. Okay, so we only have this thing. We're missing the buttons. We're missing the control in there. Why is that? Create full screen UI says create the dynamic texture, full screen GUI, and then render state to controls. And what this does is, okay, state to controls, what does that do? It says browser control, if the menu is open, then menu create a control for that. And the menu control is this thing, state to menu control. And this should return that. Yeah, it should have come back, because this is the same thing that's being rendered when you render it for the first time. Create full screen GUI. Create full screen GUI. Render. Oh, maybe let's see. Maybe there's a race condition somewhere. Creating the full screen.
What if you do the create full screen after all of those things?
Okay. Exiting VR. I wonder if anything inside relies on whether, let's see, does anything in here rely? Okay, full screen GUI, create full screen GUI, state to controls, this thing, okay, this state browsing, browser control. Browser control. Oh, let's look at render. What does render do? Render says, oh, okay, if I have this full screen GUI, root container dispose, and you add control. So if the menu is open, open up. So, okay, I think it's this thing that didn't work. And this does if you're in XR. Okay, but it's the case we're not in XR, so it doesn't apply here. So it's this thing. We dispose of that, and we want to add the control, and we're saying we're adapting it. So this is the only part that's created twice, is this content for the menu control, and then we're adapting it here. So yeah, that just this doesn't really have any race conditions, I think, in here. Okay, I moved it to the bottom. Let's see if it makes a difference. So that's open. When I jump into here, it's open. I jump out. Oh, okay. So I select this. I can select that. I jump over here. The selection. Okay, the clicky part doesn't work in here, but let's try to exit. Exit. And oh, okay. This seems to be working. Oh, okay. The edit mode didn't go away. I need to be able to do that. No. Okay, toggling this didn't work here. Let's see, are we getting any message? Toggle on, toggle off. Oh, maybe two of them are created. Do I toggle? Yeah, I think the old one is still created. So when you jump out of, I think I still want to do that. When you jump out, I think you should probably still close the editor. So we have this collaborative editor. This one opens the gizmo, but it's listening for an off and on message. And so there might be some bug here. So this isn't what so we can troubleshoot this later. So let's just add a note here. Fixed bug where when switching, when exiting XR, the and closing the or the edit toggle may be off, but the gizmo remains. Okay. All right, so I wanted to work on that mute unmute so we could jump into VR and we could kind of try this out. So mute and unmute. Right now it doesn't do anything. So okay, let me remove some of the console logs because I have a huge amount of printout here, which makes it a little hard to read. So let's just clean up a little bit of the console log. Okay, orchestrator user. Let's just get rid of some of these. These are svelte helpers. Okay, here. Mainly it's this thing. Okay, so got rid of some console logs. Here, I'm in the space. I open this. We're getting a menu action, open menu. Go to about, go to main, close the menu. Mute. Okay, I'm getting the menu action unmute, and now it's unmute. Wait. Oh, okay. It didn't do anything. We're muted, and when we click unmute, we're sending the command unmute, but we're not handling it. So we go to menu manager, and this was the section, as I said before, we're listening to menu action with so anything that's not logged here becomes no such action handler here. And scene manager getting menu action mute unmute. Getting menu action. Come on, I don't see this. Getting. Oh, okay. Scene manager. Okay, this is just console logging it out over in scene manager, but I want the menu manager to pay attention to. Okay, so menu action is the event and the payload is named mute. But why is it in menu manager? I don't see it error. Oh, this just says if it doesn't have a name, no such action handler. But actually, this is the case. It should be default. Copy, paste, and this one should be a malformed message. And so what we actually want to do is we want to handle the case where the name is unmute. We want to unmute something, and so we have to do something here. So we have an orchestrator. Orchestrator has the WebRTC client, and so when we're asked to unmute, we could do publish audio. And that would publish the audio, but it would be even nicer if this thing updated the label. So we could have case of mute, and this would be the opposite. We'd say this orchestrator WebRTC client, we'll say publish audio, but the button wouldn't change unless we change the state. So right now our state is menu open, muted, so we could just change this muted from true to false. And so after you do all this, it renders the control again. So it's probably the easiest thing to do. We could do await. If we do an await here, maybe don't do an await. I'm just afraid if you're sending it more than one message, it will block it. Let's see. Let's do this state equals this state and muted, assuming it is fine, muted is false. And the opposite is if you're asked to mute, assuming this command succeeds, we'll say true. And I believe unmute. Okay, so we're publishing the local track, and then mute. That should, and this should just work in VR. Okay, so attach mute and unmute, so probably that is working. Okay, and let's add a menu for primitive creation. So right now when you open this, the main menu just has an about, and this is just says hello. Let's add another entry here. So we go to the main template, which here it's expressed as some syntactic sugar. So we've got a divider. We can move this down even. And then in the divider, this is a vertically stacked panel. So the first element of this is main menu, which is this text up here. So that's just text. And then there's kind of this pseudocode for a link, an A tag, and it has a particular format. So the text of it is about, and then it's going to send a message. So if you provide a payload that is message, event, and payload, it will go through the signal hub and it will be listened for at the top, which changes the state and does other things, right? And then we have an edit element. It's a function which also returns one of these GUI containers. So this is a GUI container tree, GUI container that contains more GUI containers underneath it. Some of them are clickable, some of them are not. So in order to add another element here, we could just add, let's say primitives for now. Let's say, okay, so we can add a link tag, and let's just copy this. So the text of this can be primitives. Primitives? Is that how you spell primitives? Or primitives?
With the I.
Primitives, right? Okay. And we'll say go to primitives and menu action, that's fine. So we'll just save this. And so now it's in our menu. If we click on it, we should get an error. There's no such action handler. Go to primitives. So we'll go back to menu manager and we'll add a go to primitives case. And then we'll say that you're browsing primitives. And this doesn't exist, but what this did for the state is that when you came to render this under state to controls, for the browsing part, the part that is supposed to be, you click the menu and it expands, this is actually saying, okay, if your menu is open based on the state, then try to find a function that's called that browsing thing. So we have to create a function and execute it on this class. So in this case, these functions are below the fold. So we just have a main and about, which it returns a GUI tree. So we need primitives. And we need to return something. So I haven't created this class yet, but let's say it's a menu page primitives. Okay, so let's go create this class. And where did I put this? Menu page main. This is pages main. Oh, it's just under main. Okay, so Okay, I'll just create a, okay, it's under pages. So we'll create primitives, TS, and we'll just copy some boilerplate code in here. Import Babylon, import GUI. We don't need the edit manager. What are the helpers? Oh, the helpers were the GUI kind of element stuff, I think. So we don't need that. We're importing particular ones from helper. Menu manager, that's to give us the state, and I don't think we need the state right now. So I think we're just going to be menu page primitives. Primitives. And I don't think we need an edit manager. So you can give us the scene. Do we need the scene? I don't even think we need the scene. I don't think we need anything. Constructor just calls super because we are inheriting from the container. And so all we need to do is return or say that we are a type of this control. So I think we can get rid of all of this. So this constructor, this class inherits one of the Babylon classes, GUI container. And so in here, we can have some links. So main page container. Okay, so this can be primitive. It's just a name, primitives container. And we can have some links in here. So maybe the link can be box and cone. And so I think we can just say create box and create, or maybe we can just be create primitive. Create primitive and type bbox. So let's start simple with just two, a box and a cone. And we can have a back button go back to main. So this will be name go to main, and this will just look like main like that. Okay, so we've got our primitives. So main page primitives, we want this in the menu manager. Let's import this class. That's here. From pages and primitives. And then at the very bottom, not at the very bottom, but here, we instantiate that and return it. So hopefully it will just be part of the main menu. There we go. So if we click on this, okay, so there's no handler for create a primitive type box, no handler for create a primitive type cone. But fortunately, elsewhere in our code in the scene manager, let's see. Entity created. Find or create mesh. Let's see. So put this, find or create mesh. entity type name ID. So this is when you're receiving it down from the channel. But we did have a way of telling the broadcasting it out and then receiving the message back again. So where was that? That was under, like, we had a whole thing built on the Svelte side. Let me go take a look at what we had. It was like entity list, and then we had a way of saying pipe filter. So this is when you get an entity. So this was the list of entity, but what if you wanted to create a new one? Did we have that? What entity? This is to request if you wanted something deleted. Main edit. Select tab, settings, entity list. I thought it was in the entity list. Here it is, add entity. Where's this from? Okay, there's an add entity component. And then, okay, so you would send this spaces API, and arguments are selected. So selected is the type. Okay.
Where do you see that that's the type?
So up here.
Oh, line 4. Got it.
So back to our menu manager. For any message that looks like what? Okay, you were receiving create primitive. So go up to the listen part. Let's say the case is the name is create primitive. So we'll send a message on Signal Hub to the Spaces API, add entity with broadcast, and this will be the, what is the message here? Message payload type. All right, so I'm looking at the origin. It would create it at the origin. Primitives, give me a box. Ooh, there's my box. And
Sweet.
edit, move this guy, make me a cone. Okay, got my cone. Can do that. If I close this menu, refresh the page, they've persisted. We got these here. Cool. Let's add some of the other primitives. We've got the box. What was
Wait, can you do it in VR mode? Like move those things with the controls?
Yeah, I just can't do it. This is a VR simulator, so it's a plugin for the WebXR. So you would have to go in like this, and then you would have to take the pointer of this controller and point it over here, which is a bit tricky because I have to go like this. I gotta
Oh, I see.
gotta turn this guy off, and then I gotta go get this, and then I gotta like turn it and point it at that, and then I gotta come over to these buttons and I gotta click one of these things to try to get it. It's just very hard to do. So we should jump into VR to do that. We've got like maybe 10 minutes left. All right, which ones should we add? We want cone, box, sphere, I think is one. So, okay, the primitives menu, right? Primitives. So maybe we can make this a loop. Well, where was our other page? That was in add entity. So let's loop over these options. And then just come back down to primitives. So we can wrap this into a function. So let's call this prim options. And we can just say const options, and then we'll options dot map, and for every prim we will return what will we return? We'll return an A thing, where the type is the prim, and yeah, the name of this is also the prim, and that's the only thing. So we'll return this, and then we'll return this map, and then okay, so this thing takes a splice of options. So how do you I think what I can do is left shift this into it. Okay, copy. So let's say let options equal prim options, and then actually, can you do this? Let's see. That, comma, do that. Does that put this in front of it? And then can you do can I just do like that? Let's see. Oh, it's off the screen. I can't get back. I got too many. Let's take some out. Take the spawn point out. We have to find a scrollable. I can barely get to it. Okay. And so let's try one. So sphere. Okay, there's our sphere. Cool. All right, so muting and unmuting. So we should be able to hear each other. Let's publish it and check it out in the VR. So I'm going to stop the recording.